Hello guys, today in this video, we are going to help you to find out the best ice cream makers in market. I made this list based on my personal opinion, and I tried to list them based on their quality, durability, customer review, and more. If you want to see their price and find out more information about them, you can check our links in the description below. Number 6. Yonanas Classic Soft Serve Dessert Maker. The Yonanas machine is admittedly a little gimmicky. It chops up frozen bananas and other fruit into a soft serve-like vegan dessert, and that's really all it does. You can't use it to freeze standard ice cream or sorted bases, and you can't put anything in it besides peeled, pitted fruit. But we enjoyed the tasty, soft serve we got when we tested it out. It works essentially like a food processor. You load the fruit into the top and push it down with a plunger, and then pulverized frozen pulp comes out directly into the serving bowl. Using a combination of bananas and strawberries, we got a treat that was creamy and scoopable. Look, you're not going to mistake the results of the Yonanas for real dairy ice cream. Our test batch had chunks of fruit in it and kind of a gooey texture, but it makes a healthier dessert that could be great for ice cream-loving kids. The sweetness level depends entirely on the fruit you use, so we aim for overripe over underripe. The manual recommends cheetah-spotted bananas. Since it doesn't work in batches, there's really no limit on how much the Yonanas can make at a time, though the instructions say not to run the motor for more than 2 minutes straight without some cool down time in between. All told, we put 2 bananas and 2 cups of strawberries through in less than 5 minutes, though it took some force on the plunger to push everything through the machine. Number 5. Chef'n Sweet Spot Ice Cream Maker. Rolled ice cream is a treat made by spreading and scraping a liquid base across an ice-cold surface as it freezes. The technique yields a delicious texture, and it's also a fun and safe way for kids to get hands-on in making their own ice cream. The sweet spot is in the shape of a pie pan, made of dense material that will stay ice-cold for a good while after overnight freezing. You pour about half a cup of liquid into the pan, then use the included plastic paddles to stir, scrape, and scoop as it freezes. You have to keep everything in constant motion for best results, but the instructions say it should only take 2 minutes to freeze. In our tests, it took 1.5 minutes for excellent ice cream, but we went for just over 3 minutes to get firm sorbeted. We were honestly blown away by the sorbet this thing made. The recipe we use is vegan, with only strawberries, sugar, lemon juice, and salt, but the scraping and mixing technique made for a light but creamy texture that was far better than we expected. The constant motion prevents ice crystals from forming while working in a lot of air, and the resulting sorbet melts on the tongue like cotton candy. For ice cream, adding mix-ins in the last few seconds of the process is easy. The pieces work in evenly, and you have lots of control over how much you chop things into smaller bits. Cleanup is also really easy, thanks to a high lip that keeps everything fairly well contained. The pan isn't dishwasher safe, but washing by hand is quite simple. Unfortunately, the small size of the sweet spot makes it a poor choice for high-volume ice cream production. It makes less than half a pint at a time, and it can only make so many servings before it warms up and needs to go back in the freezer. With that said, it's perfect for a fun DIY ice cream night with the family. Number 4. Cuisinart Ice 100 Compressor Ice Cream and Gelato Maker. Most ice cream makers can freeze a batch in an hour or less if you don't count the full day the bowl has to chill beforehand. Yes, you could keep the bowl in the freezer, but it takes up a lot of space. The Cuisinart Ice 100 has an onboard compressor, which means there's no pre-freezing required. It lets you make ice cream on a whim whenever you'd like, but the trade-off is that compressor ice cream makers are quite a bit more expensive than units with a basic motor and a freezable bowl. The Cuisinart Ice 100 is a great base-level compressor unit, a workhorse that freezes a quart-and-a-half batch in an hour or less. Its single churning speed is fairly slow, which was a good thing in our sorbet test. We got a very smooth and fruit-forward strawberry sorbet, and it was ready in 41 minutes. The manual recommends a full hour for sorbet. We were monitoring the machine and decided to stop it early. With ice cream, we got to a soft serve-like consistency in 36 minutes. And then we tossed in the Oreo crumbles to mix in thoroughly in about 30 seconds. Both test batches firmed up to a more scoopable texture after a couple hours in the freezer, though freezing overnight produced some significant ice crystals. This machine doesn't have any recipe-specific modes or temperature adjustments or a pre-chill setting. It has an on/off switch and a timer, and that's really it. It's less fancy and less versatile than the Breville Smart Scoop, but it's also $200 less expensive. Number 3. Nostalgia 4-quart wood bucket ice cream maker. Long ago, even before the freezer was invented, it was still possible to make ice cream at home. You just needed a bucket of ice and salt, a hand crank, and lots of muscle power. The salt is there to melt the ice and lower the freezing point of the liquid. This machine replicates that method, complete with wooden bucket, though it thankfully electrifies the crank part. The Nostalgia model is fun for its nostalgia, but it also features a huge capacity of up to a gallon of ice cream per batch. In testing, we found that you need to get the salt and ice layering just right for best results, which is unfortunate as there aren't very specific instructions included on how much of each to use. We'd suggest starting with at least 8 pounds of ice and 3 cups of salt, and make sure the interior container is flush with the bottom as you load up ice and salt around the sides. We got pretty good results in both of our tests, with lots of sorbet and ice cream that tasted great, but were a bit soft and inconsistent in texture. It did a great job mixing in the cookie bits evenly and thoroughly, although it's a bit of a pain to stop and detach the motor, add the mix-ins, and then put it back on again. Setup is kind of a general downside with the Nostalgia machine, as the heavy motor sits on top. You have to balance everything carefully in order to get it in place without moving the inner container, but once the motor is locked in, it's quite secure. The churning process is also quite messy, with spillage from both the ice cream container and the outer bucket, which is also pretty heavy when full. We'd say to set the whole thing in the sink while you run it, or better yet, use it outdoors for an enjoyable summertime activity. Overall, the Nostalgia doesn't make the best ice cream in the world, but it makes good ice cream, and a lot of it. Plus, it's inexpensive and fun to use. Number 2. Cuisinart 1.5-quart frozen yogurt, ice cream, and sorted maker. The process is simple and designed to be mess-free. The double-insulated freezer bowl fits into the base, the mixing paddle fits into that, and the plastic cover holds everything together. You pour in your base mixture, and as the bowl spins, the paddle scrapes a layer of frozen material off the interior wall, incorporating it back into the mixture. After about 20 minutes, you get fully churned ice cream. To add mix-ins, you just toss them into the bowl when the batch is almost done spinning. There's only one setting, one blade, and no timers to worry about. In testing, our ice cream and sorbet both had even texture, albeit a bit softer and more soft serve-like than some other machines. Sticking the finished product in the freezer for a couple hours firmed it up, but it retained its smoothness and scoopability. The main catch, though, is that you need a pre-frozen bowl, and this machine's is pretty bulky. If you want to be able to make ice cream at the drop of a hat, it has to live in the freezer all the time, and it'll take up a lot of room. This model has a smaller capacity than some of Cuisinart's other ice cream makers, so be mindful of batch size when you're following recipes and scale down accordingly. We didn't do the math quite right and got a little overflow in one test. Also, none of the parts are dishwasher safe, but they're also unlikely to need much more than a rinse. Number 1. Ninja Creami Deluxe 11-in-1 XL Ice Cream Maker. While most ice cream makers freeze the liquid base while whipping in air at the same time, the Ninja Creami starts with a jar of frozen base and uses a special blender blade-like creamerizer paddle to give it proper smooth and velvety texture. The unusual method made our lab's team of trained chefs and experienced home cooks suspicious, but in the end, the TikTok-famous gadget turned out to be the best ice cream machine we've ever used. With both sorbet and ice cream, the Creami Deluxe produced a firm and consistently textured product, with no ice crystals or unspun base built up in the corners of the container. Both were ready to eat and perfect straight out of the machine. After 2 hours of refreezing, the ice cream maintained its texture exactly, and the sorbet was still pretty good, a bit denser than we'd like, with a few ice crystals on top. The actual whipping process with the Creami Deluxe takes just over 5 minutes, but you do have to prepare the base and freeze it overnight first. Each of the 2 included cups has a maximum fill line for the base at about 1.5 pints, which turns into roughly a quart of finished product. That's a decent amount, but making fresh ice cream on demand for a huge group isn't really feasible. The great thing about the way this machine works is that the freezing and whipping process can produce all sorts of frozen treats. The Creami Deluxe has 11 modes, with automatic time and speed settings designed for different textures and ingredients, from ice cream, sorbet, and frozen yogurt, to milkshakes and frappuccino-style coffee drinks. We love the mix-in mode, which incorporates solid bits into finished ice cream. In our tests, the blade did break up some of the larger chunks of Oreo, but we got thorough, even mixing that stayed that way after hours in the freezer. On top of all that, cleaning is easy. Most of the removable plastic parts are dishwasher safe, and the blade itself is simple to remove and wash by hand thanks to its online popularity. The Creamy Deluxe may be sold out at many retailers. If that's the case, you can also look for the original Creamy, which works the same way but has just 7 modes. It's not much cheaper than the Deluxe, which is why we prefer the latter.